The courtroom was a cavern of polished wood and silent judgment, each surface seeming to absorb the warmth and hope from the air. Sarah sat hunched at the defendant's table, the fabric of her simple dress feeling rough against her skin, a constant reminder of how far she had fallen. She was a ghost in her own life, watching as stern-faced people in formal robes discussed the end of her world. The accusation was a dagger in her heart, embezzlement from the very firm she had given her life to. It was a lie, a monstrous, tangled lie, but one woven with such skill that she was suffocating in its threads. Beside her, a small, warm hand crept into her own. It was Lily, her 7-year-old daughter. Dressed in her Sunday best, with 2 neat braids framing a face of fierce determination, she looked entirely out of place. Yet, she sat straighter than any of the adults, her dark eyes fixed not on her weeping mother, but on the elevated bench where the judge presided, a figure of immense and terrifying power. Lily wasn't just there for comfort. She was there on a mission, a secret pact between herself and her mother's sinking heart. Sarah's own lawyer, a man provided by the state, had already surrendered in his soul. He shuffled his papers with a sigh, his arguments thin, and his spirit defeated. He had told her to prepare for the worst. But Lily had whispered something different to her that morning, a promise spoken with the unshakable faith only a child possesses. "Don't worry, Mommy," she had said, clutching a worn leather-bound book to her chest. "I'll fix it." It felt like another lifetime when their small apartment was filled with light and laughter, not the heavy dread that now clung to the furniture. Sarah remembered Saturday mornings with Lily on a stool beside her, her small hands covered in flour as they baked cookies. Sarah had been a rising star at a prestigious financial firm, respected for her sharp mind and unwavering integrity. She worked hard, not for the wealth, but for Lily, to build a world for her that was safe and full of possibilities. She used to bring work home sometimes. Not the sensitive files, but ledgers and practice books to show Lily the neat columns of numbers. She taught her how to balance figures, making a game of it. "Every number has its place, sweet pea," she would say, tapping a column with her pen. "And if one is out of place, the whole story falls apart." Lily, with her serious little face, would nod and watch, absorbing everything with an intensity that always amazed Sarah. The day the world shattered began like any other. 2 stern-faced partners from the firm, including the formidable Mr. Alistair Finch, had arrived at her office. They didn't speak. They simply laid a file on her desk, its pages filled with phantom transactions and forged signatures that led directly to a secret account in her name. It was a masterful deception, a web so intricate she couldn't see where the truth ended and the lies began. Her protests were dismissed, her shock taken as a sign of guilt. She was fired, disgraced, and thrown to the wolves. Alistair Finch was a man carved from ice. As the senior partner, he commanded the firm with a quiet, venomous authority. He moved through the world as if he owned it, his expensive suits a kind of armor against the messiness of ordinary lives. He had never liked Sarah, had seen her rapid rise as an affront to the old order of things, and had often made his displeasure known through backhanded compliments and impossible deadlines. He was the architect of her ruin. She knew it in her bones. Sarah recalled a company gala, months before the accusations. She had just secured a major client, and the praise was flowing. Finch had approached her, a thin smile on his lips that never reached his cold gray eyes. "Remarkable work, Sarah," he'd said, his voice a low purr. "One wonders how a single mother from your ... background manages to be so ruthlessly effective." The words were a slap, a reminder that in his eyes she would always be an outsider, an imposter in his world of inherited wealth and power. He had been the one to oversee the accounts she was now accused of plundering. He had praised her meticulous record-keeping, even as he was likely laying the groundwork for his betrayal. He had woven the lie with her own dedication, using her strengths as the very tools to build her prison. He stood on the other side of the courtroom now, spectator watching his plan unfold to perfection, his face a mask of detached concern. The trial was a blur of legal jargon and damning testimony. One by one, former colleagues, people who had once shared coffee and jokes with her, took the stand. Under the sharp questioning of the prosecutor, it painted a picture of a desperate woman, living beyond her means, siphoning company funds to maintain a lifestyle she couldn't afford. Each word was a fresh betrayal, twisting her reality into a grotesque caricature of greed. Sarah's lawyer offered only feeble objections, which were swatted away by the judge with visible impatience. He could poke holes in the prosecution's narrative, because he did believe in her innocence himself. He saw what he was told to see. A mountain of evidence. A clear-cut case. He was just going through the motions, a tired actor in a play whose ending was already written. Through it all, Lily sat motionless, her hand never leaving her mother's. She didn't cry or fidget. She watched, her gaze sweeping from the prosecutor to the witness, to the judge, and finally to Mr. Finch, who observed the proceedings with a look of grave disappointment that was more chilling than any overt anger. Lily was a silent sentinel, guarding her mother's crumbling spirit, waiting for her moment. The prosecution presented its final piece of evidence. It was a ledger, the main logbook for the department Sarah managed. The prosecutor, a sharp woman, with an unforgiving voice, pointed to a series of entries, all signed with a perfect imitation of Sarah's signature. They corresponded with the secret bank account, a neat and tidy trail of theft. "The records are flawless," the prosecutor declared, her voice echoing in the silent room. "The work of a meticulous and guilty woman." Sarah stared at the projected image of the ledger page. It was her book, the one she had balanced every single day. But the entries were alien to her. The numbers were lies, the signatures a violation. She felt a wave of nausea. How could they do this? How could they twist her diligence into a weapon against her? Her own work, her own pride was being used to hang her. Her lawyer gave a defeated shrug. "There's nothing I can do, Sarah," he whispered, his breath smelling of stale coffee and surrender. "They have the books. It's over." The finality in his voice was like a shovel of dirt on her coffin. Hope, the last flickering ember, was finally extinguished. She dropped her head into her hands, the silence of the court pressing in on her, a heavy shroud. "Does the defendant have anything to say before we conclude?" the judge asked, her voice tired, already moving on to the next case in her mind. The question was a formality, a final box to be ticked. Sarah's lawyer nudged her gently. "Just say no, Sarah. It's better not to speak." But Sarah couldn't speak. A sob was caught in her throat, a raw, ragged sound of utter despair. Her whole life, her name, her future, all of it was gone, stolen by a man who would now watch her be led away. Her shoulders shook, and for the first time in front of her daughter, she began to openly weep, her body convulsing with the grief of it all. The courtroom looked on, some with pity, others with cold satisfaction. It was then that a small, clear voice cut through the heavy silence. "My mother has something to say." Every head turned. Lily was on her feet, her small body trembling slightly, but her voice as steady as a rock. She was no longer holding her mother's hand, but was standing beside the defendant's table, facing the judge directly. The judge, taken aback, peered down at her over her spectacles. "And who, young lady, are you?" A ripple of murmurs went through the courtroom. The prosecutor sighed in exasperation, and Sarah's lawyer looked horrified, trying to gently pull Lily back into her seat. But Lily stood her ground, her chin held high. She looked directly at the judge, her expression one of profound seriousness that was almost comical on such a small child. "My name is Lily," she announced, her voice ringing with a strange authority, "and I am my mom's lawyer." A wave of outright laughter and disbelief swept the room. The prosecutor chuckled and shook her head. Even the judge cracked a small, weary smile. "Is this some kind of joke?" she asked, her tone shifting from tired to annoyed. "Ma'am, please control your child." Sarah, her face streaked with tears, reached for Lily, whispering her name in a choked plea. "Lily, no, please, sit down." But Lily didn't sit down. She ignored the laughter, the whispers, the frantic tugging from the lawyer. Her eyes were locked on the judge, a silent challenge passing between the powerful woman on the bench and the tiny girl on the floor. "I am not a joke," Lily said, her voice dropping the slightest bit, losing its childish treble and taking on a new, steely edge. "And I have evidence." The judge's smile vanished. The room fell silent again, the laughter dying in people's throats. There was something in the girl's unwavering gaze that commanded attention, It wasn't the petulance of a child. It was a deep, burning conviction. Evidence, the judge repeated, leaning forward slightly. Her curiosity piqued despite herself. What could a little girl possibly have as evidence? Prosecution is wrong, Lily stated plainly. They said the records are flawless. They are not. They're full of mistakes. She finally broke her gaze from the judge to look at the projected image of the ledger. The most important mistake. The prosecutor stood up, her face a mask of indignation. Your Honor, this is absurd. This is a court of law, not a playground. The child is clearly distressed and... The judge held up a hand, silencing her. She was still looking at Lily, a complex expression on her face. It was a mix of pity, professional duty, and a flicker of something else. Intrigue. Let her speak, the judge said quietly. Let's hear about this mistake. The court has a moment to spare. All eyes were on Lily. Sarah felt as if the world had stopped spinning. Daughter, her tiny brave daughter, was holding the entire courtroom captive. Lily took a deep breath and pointed a small finger at the screen displaying the ledger. My mommy taught me all about the ledgers, she began, her voice clear and methodical. She has a system, a special system. System, the prosecutor scoffed, unable to stay silent. God, what kind of system? Lily turned her gaze on the prosecutor, her look withering. A color system, she said simply. For her pens. She then turned back to the judge. My mommy uses a blue pen for all the official entries. Every single one. It's her work pen. But for notes to herself, little reminders in the margins, she uses a black pen. That's her thinking pen. She always says blue is for business, black is for my brain. Ga-da-da-da-da-da-da. It was such a simple domestic detail, yet in the sterile environment of the court it sounded profound. Lily continued, her confidence growing. Look at the entries, she urged, pointing again. The ones they say, my mom wrote. The ones that steal the money. The court clerk, on a nod from the judge, zoomed in on the fraudulent entries. They are all in blue ink. They look right. The signatures are in blue ink. They look right too. That proves our point, the prosecutor said with a smug smile. They are official entries. No, Lily shot back, her voice sharp. Look closer. In the margin, next to the biggest fake transfer, there's a note, a thinking note. Out. It says double check with accounting. But the note is also in blue ink. A confused murmur rippled through the gallery. He didn't understand the significance. But Sarah did. Her heart began to beat, a painful, hopeful rhythm. She would never, ever write a thinking note with her business pen. It was a tiny break in her own rigid system, a rule she had never once broken. So what? The prosecutor demanded. Her patience clearly gone. She used the wrong pen. It means nothing. It means everything, Lily insisted, her voice rising with passion. My mommy would never do that, never ever. Her thinking notes are always in black. Always. It's her rule. She then did something that stunned everyone. She walked over to the evidence table, picked up the actual ledger that had been presented, and carried the heavy book over to the judge's bench. The bailiff moved to stop her, but the judge waved him off. With great effort, Lily heaved the book onto the podium. Look for yourself, my lady, she said, using the formal address she must have heard on television. She flipped through the pages with a practiced hand, showing page after page of Sarah's neat blue entries, punctuated by the occasional, distinct black inked note in the margin. Blue for business, black for brain, she repeated, her voice echoing in the silent room. For years it's always the same, till the pages where the stealing happens. Then the rule is broken. The judge stared down at the ledger, her expression unreadable. She slowly turned the pages herself, her eyes scanning the columns. She saw exactly what Lily described, a consistent, almost obsessive pattern of two ink colors, a system maintained over years. And then, on the pages detailing the fraudulent transfers, she saw the anomaly. The marginal notes, the kind Sarah always made in black, were suddenly in blue, the same blue as the forged entries. It was a small thing, tiny detail. In the face of overwhelming financial data, it was almost insignificant. But it was also something that couldn't be easily explained. Why would a meticulous embezzler, so careful to forge signatures and transactions perfectly, suddenly abandon a personal, ingrained habit at the exact moment of her crime? It was a crack in the perfect story, a loose thread. The judge looked up from the book, her gaze sweeping over the courtroom. She looked at the smug prosecutor, the defeated defense lawyer, the powerful Mr. Finch, and finally back at Sarah, whose tear-streaked face was now filled with a dawning, terrified hope. And then she looked at the little girl standing before her. A child who knew her mother's habits better than anyone, who saw a truth in a splash of ink that all the experts had missed. Mr. Finch, the judge said suddenly, her voice sharp and clear. Alistair Finch, who had been watching with detached amusement, was startled. He stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. Yes, Your Honor. You oversaw this department, the judge stated, not asked. You were familiar with the defendant's work, were you not? Finch's eyes darted nervously towards the ledger on the judge's bench. Yes, of course. She was one of our most diligent employees. Which makes this whole affair so tragic. The false sympathy in his voice was thick enough to choke on. Diligent indeed, the judge mused, tapping a finger on the ledger. So diligent, she maintained a color-coded system for her entire career at your firm. Did you know about this? Pen preference, Mr. Finch? Finch hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. I can't say I was aware of such trivial details, Your Honor. I was concerned with profits, not stationery. The judge's eyes narrowed. Trivial details are often where the truth resides, Mr. Finch. She turned to the prosecutor. I want every single document submitted as evidence re-examined, not just by your financial experts. I want a forensic document analyst. I want them to look at the ink, the paper, the pressure of the pen on these specific pages. The prosecutor was stunned into silence. This was a complete deviation from procedure. But, Your Honor, the case, the judge interrupted, her voice like steel, is not as closed as you believed. This court is adjourned for 1 week. I expect a full forensic report on my desk by then. She banged her gavel, the sound cracking through the tense air like a gunshot. The trial was not over. A 7-year-old girl had just stopped a runaway train with a detail about blue and black pens. The week that followed was a whirlwind of surreal activity. Sarah was released on her own recognizance, a temporary reprieve that felt like a dream. She and Lily returned to their small apartment, the air suddenly lighter. The state-appointed lawyer was still bewildered, but a new energy buzzed around the case. The judge's order had sent shockwaves through the legal community. A new team was brought in, forensic specialists who descended on the evidence with microscopes and chemical tests. They weren't looking at the numbers anymore. They were looking at the ink. They analyzed its chemical composition, the way it had bled into the fibers of the paper, the microscopic indentations left by the pen. Lily became a small, quiet hero. The new lawyers, a sharp and energetic team funded by a legal aid society that had caught wind of the story, treated her with a gentle reverence. They didn't ask her about finances. They asked her about her mom. They asked about her routines, her habits, the little things that defined her. Lily, in her simple, direct way, told them everything, painting a picture of a woman incapable of the crimes she was accused of. The forensic report landed like a bombshell. The ink used for the fraudulent entries and the marginal notes on those specific pages was a perfect match. But it was a different batch of ink from the blue ink Sarah had used in the preceding months. More damningly, analysis of the pen pressure showed that the signatures, while visually perfect, lacked the natural flow and rhythm of Sarah's genuine handwriting. They were careful, precise forgeries. The biggest revelation, however, came from the thinking note that Lily had pointed out. Under microscopic analysis, the fibers of the paper in that spot showed faint traces of a different substance. It was the residue of a chemical solvent, one used to lift ink from paper. The original note, whatever it was, had been erased. The story was suddenly clear. Someone had not just added fake entries. They had meticulously altered existing pages. They had lifted a genuine note written in Sarah's black thinking pen and replaced it with a blue-inked decoy to make it blend in with their forgeries. But in their arrogance, they had made a mistake. They had used the wrong color, a mistake only a 7-year-old girl who adored her mother would ever notice. When the court reconvened, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery was packed. The judge entered with a grim, determined expression. She held the forensic report in her hand. She didn't waste any time. Mr. Finch, she called out, please approach the witness stand. Alistair Finch, looking paler and less composed than before, walked slowly to the stand. He was sworn in, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly. The new lead defense lawyer, a woman named Ms. Anya Sharma, stood up. She was sharp, focused, and radiated a confidence that Sarah's previous lawyer had completely lacked.
"Oh, Mr. Finch."
Anya began, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "You testified that you were not aware of Sarah's trivial habit of using different colored pens. Is that correct?"
"Oh."
Finch cleared his throat. "Yes, that is correct." Anya smiled, a cold, dangerous smile. "That's a shame, because it seems the person who framed her wasn't aware of it either." Anya walked him and the court through the forensic findings. She explained the different ink batches, the pressure analysis of the forgeries, and the chemical residue of the solvent. With each revelation, another layer of Finch's composure was stripped away. He shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming on the wooden rail of the witness box. "A complex forgery, Mr. Finch," Anya continued, her voice rising. "Someone with intimate access to the company's ledgers. Someone who knew Sarah's responsibilities and could mimic her signature. Someone with the authority to prevent others from looking too closely at the books. Does that sound like anyone you know?" Finch's face was slick with a thin sheen of sweat. "This is outrageous speculation," he blustered. "You have no proof that I had anything to do with this?" The prosecutor, now looking deeply uncomfortable, did not object. He was watching the proceedings like a man watching a car crash in slow motion. "Chapter 19, proof," Anya said, raising an eyebrow. "Let's talk about proof." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, during the investigation this past week, we subpoenaed Mr. Finch's personal financial records and office supply orders." She held up a new document. "It seems that 3 months ago, Mr. Finch's personal account received a series of large, unexplained cash deposits. Around the same time, his executive assistant placed a bulk order for office supplies. An interesting order?" She paused for dramatic effect, letting the silence hang in the air. Among the usual items, paper, staples, paper clips, was a very specific request. For a chemical solvent designed for ink removal and several pens, blue pens of the exact brand and batch number as the ink used in the forgeries. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Alistair Finch went rigid, his face turning ashen. The mask was gone. All that was left was the raw, panicked face of a guilty man caught in a trap of his own making. "Those funds were from a private investment. The supplies are for the entire office," Finch stammered, his voice cracking. But the lie was transparent. The edifice of his power and respectability was crumbling into dust, lived for everyone to see. "An investment that has no paper trail," Anya countered smoothly. "And an ink-removing solvent ordered for an office that is supposedly paperless? An office run by a man who pays no attention to trivial details like pens?" She walked closer to the witness stand, her eyes boring into his. "The truth is, your own investments failed. Didn't they, Mr. Finch? You were the one in debt. You were the one stealing from the company. And when the auditors got close, you needed a scapegoat. A single mother, an outsider you resented, thought she was the perfect target?" Finch didn't answer. He stared blankly ahead, seeing not the lawyer before him but the ruin of his life. He had been so clever, so meticulous. He had accounted for everything, every number, every signature. Everything except the fierce, observant love of a little girl for her mother. The judge's voice was cold as ice. "Mr. Finch, I am ordering an immediate and full investigation into your financial activities. I am also placing you under arrest on suspicion of perjury, forgery, and embezzlement." 2 bailiffs moved towards the witness stand. Finch didn't resist. He seemed to shrink inside his expensive suit, all the power and arrogance draining out of him, leaving behind a hollow, defeated man. As they led him away, his eyes met Sarah's for a brief moment. There was no remorse in them, only a flash of pure, unadulterated hatred. It was a look of a man furious not at what he had done, but that he had been caught. Sarah felt no triumph, only a profound, weary sadness for the ugliness of it all. Then she felt a small tug on her sleeve. It was Lily, her face solemn. Sarah knelt and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug, burying her face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and her innocence. "You did it, baby," she whispered, tears now of relief and gratitude streaming down her face. "You saved me." Lily just hugged her back tightly, her small arms a shield against the whole world. The courtroom erupted into quiet chaos as the judge exited. Reporters who had caught wind of the dramatic turn of events rushed forward, their cameras flashing. But Anya Sharma and her team formed a protective circle around Sarah and Lily, guiding them out of a side door and away from the media frenzy. Outside, the city air felt fresh and clean for the first time in months. The weight that had been crushing Sarah's chest for so long had finally lifted, leaving her feeling lightheaded and weak with relief. The world, which had been gray and threatening, was suddenly full of color and light again. Lily looked up at her mother, her eyes shining. "Does this mean we can go home, Mommy?" she asked, her voice small and hopeful. Sarah choked back a sob and nodded, unable to speak. She squeezed Lily's hand, the small, warm anchor that had held her steady through the storm. Home. The word had never sounded so sweet. The days that followed were a gentle re-entry into life. The charges against Sarah were formally and publicly dropped. The firm, in an effort to control the public relations nightmare, issued a groveling apology and offered her a generous settlement, which Anya Sharma skillfully negotiated to be even more generous. They begged her to come back, promising her Finch's old position. Sarah thought about it for a long time. The money would secure their future. The position would be the ultimate vindication. But when she looked at the towering glass building that had once been her second home, she felt a chill. It was a place of ghosts, of betrayal and painful memories. It was a world she no longer wanted to belong to. She politely declined the offer. She decided to take the settlement and start something new, something on her own terms. She wanted to build a life where she was in control, where her worth wasn't determined by men like Alistair Finch. She wanted a life where she had more time for baking cookies on Saturday mornings. The story of the little girl who became her mother's lawyer became a local legend. It was a story of hope, of a David and Goliath battle fought not with stones, but with colored pens and a child's unwavering belief. People on the street would sometimes recognize them, smiling at Lily with a mixture of awe and affection. Lily, for her part, took the newfound attention in stride. She was not interested in being a celebrity. She was interested in being a 7-year-old. She wanted to play in the park, read her books, and learn how to ride her bike without training wheels. The courtroom was a strange, distant memory, a story that had happened to someone else, but something inside her had changed. A quiet confidence had taken root. She had faced down the most powerful people in a room and had won. She knew, in a way that most adults never learn, that truth was a powerful weapon, and that no one was too small to wield it. One evening, a few months later, Sarah was tucking Lily into bed. The apartment was peaceful, filled with the comforting sounds of the city at night. Lily was quiet, looking at the ceiling, her brow furrowed in thought. "Mommy?" she said softly. "Ah, yes, sweet pea." "That judge?" Lily said. She was scary at first, but she listened. Sarah smiled, smoothing her daughter's hair back from her forehead. Yes, she did. She was a good judge. She listened to the truth. "When I grow up," Lily announced, turning to look at her mother, her eyes serious and clear, "I think I want to be like her. I want to be a judge, so I can listen to all the stories and find the real one." Sarah's heart swelled with a love so fierce it almost hurt. Her daughter, who had saved her from a lie, wanted to spend her life searching for the truth. Sarah did start her own business. It was a small consulting firm, helping people who had been wronged by large corporations. She used her sharp mind and her first-hand experience of the system's flaws to fight for the underdog. Her partner in this new venture was Anya Sharma, the lawyer who had believed in her. It became a formidable team. Her first employee was her old state-appointed lawyer. He had come to her after the trial, his face etched with shame and regret. He apologized for his lack of faith and asked for a chance to do some real good. Seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes, Sarah gave him that chance. Her new office wasn't in a towering glass skyscraper. It was a modest suite of rooms above a bakery, and it always smelled faintly of fresh bread. It was a place of hope. A place where people who felt lost and voiceless could come and find someone who would listen. Years passed. Lily grew from a serious little girl into a bright, compassionate young woman. She excelled in school, her mind as sharp as her mother's, but her heart full of a unique empathy. She never lost that quiet determination, that sense of justice that had burned so brightly in her as a child. She volunteered at her mother's firm during the summers, learning the ropes, not of law, but of listening. She sat with clients, hearing their stories of loss and betrayal, and they found comfort in her calm, attentive presence. She still kept the old, worn, leather-bound book from that fateful day, a reminder of where her journey had begun. Alistair Finch was convicted on all charges. He lost his fortune, his reputation, and his freedom. He became a forgotten man, a cautionary tale whispered in the boardrooms he once ruled. His name, once a symbol of power, was now a synonym for disgrace. On the day Lily graduated from law school, top of her class, Sarah sat in the audience, her eyes filled with tears of pride. She watched her daughter walk across the stage, her cap perched on her head, her smile radiant and full of promise. The memory of that dark courtroom felt like a scene from a black-and-white movie, a lifetime away. After the ceremony, Lily found her in the crowd. She was holding her diploma in one hand. In the other she was holding two pens, one blue, one black. She held them out to her mother with a smile. "For business," she said, tapping the blue one. "And for brain," she finished, tapping the black. "Yes." Sarah laughed through her tears and hugged her daughter, the brilliant, incredible woman who had once been the little girl who saved her life. The circle was complete. The story had found its true and happy ending. The legacy of that day was not one of bitterness or revenge. It was a legacy of love, truth, and the extraordinary power of paying attention. It taught Sarah that true strength wasn't about status or power, but about integrity and the willingness to fight for what is right, even when all hope seems lost. It taught an entire city that heroes come in all sizes, that sometimes the most profound truths are not found in complex legal arguments or mountains of data, but in the simple, unwavering observations of a child who knows and loves her parent. It was a reminder that the smallest voice can roar like a lion when it speaks the truth.
Eyes.
And for Lily, it was the beginning of everything. The courtroom had not broken her. It had forged her. It had set her on a path that she would walk with grace, intelligence, and an unshakable commitment to justice. Forever carrying the memory of the day she stood up and declared, "I am my mom's lawyer." Life blossomed for Sarah and Lily. The consulting firm flourished, becoming a beacon of hope for many. Sarah never lost her humility or her gratitude. Every victory for a client felt like a personal triumph, a reaffirmation of the path she had chosen after stepping out of the darkness. She found a quiet, steady happiness that no corporate ladder could ever have provided. Lily, true to her word, eventually became a judge. She was known for her sharp intellect, but even more so for her patience and compassion. Lawyers appearing before her knew they had to be prepared, but they also knew they would be heard. She never forgot to look for the trivial details, the small human truths hidden within the cold, hard facts of a case. She never told her own story in her courtroom. She didn't have to. It was there in the way she listened, in the way she looked at every person who stood before her not as a case file, but as a human being with a story. She was, in every sense, a good judge. One afternoon, an old leather-bound ledger was delivered to Judge Lily's chambers. It was a gift from her mother. Tucked inside was a single photograph from years ago, a small girl with two neat braids, standing defiantly in a vast courtroom. On the back, Sarah had written a simple inscription: "My lawyer, my hero, my daughter. We always knew how to find the real story." Lily traced the image of her younger self with a finger, a soft smile on her lips. The memory was no longer painful or frightening. It was the bedrock on which her entire life had been built. It was a story of a mother's love, a daughter's faith, and the incredible, unbelievable thing that can happen when one small person refuses to let a lie win. It proved that the most powerful force in any room is unto the law, or the evidence, or the power of the people in robes. It's the truth. And sometimes it just takes the eyes of a child to see it clearly. The bond between a mother and child is one of the most powerful forces on earth. It's a story of love that can move mountains, and in this case, change the course of justice in a courtroom. It shows that courage isn't about size or age. It's about standing up for what you believe in, no matter the odds. This story is a testament to the fact that even in our darkest moments, a small light of truth can expose the biggest lies. It's a reminder to always listen to the quiet voices, for they often speak the most important truths. The world can be a complicated place, But the love between a family is a simple, powerful, and unbreakable truth. If this story of a little girl, is incredible courage, and a mother's unwavering love touched your heart, please show your support by hitting that like button. And to ensure you don't miss out on more emotional and inspiring stories like this one, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.